The person who answered the phone was that manager. Even from the other end of the line, it was clear that he was irritated. When I mentioned that I couldn't go to work due to my grandmother's funeral, the manager once again started saying something absurd.
Don't take time off for weddings and funerals. Where do you find such idiots? Come to the office right away.
Despite explaining that I was at a funeral, the manager demanding I come to the office might not have a heart. Thinking that I didn't want to work with someone indifferent to others' feelings anymore, I spoke to the manager on the other end of the phone. Well then, I quit. It may not be necessary for the company, but this funeral is the most important thing in my life. Thank you for everything. The manager was delighted to have gotten rid of someone he didn't like from the company, but the next day, he would regret his joy. When he was suddenly summoned to the president's office, the manager was angrily yelled at.
Where is he? Explain. But don't think it'll go smoothly depending on the content.
Huh?
It was the first time the manager realized he had done something irreparable. I'm David, a 42-year-old office worker. When I was in elementary school, my parents died in a traffic accident and my grandmother, Sarah, took me in and raised me. I became a truant, pessimistic about life after suddenly losing my parents. Because I couldn't calm down even at home, I started going out alone at night. Those who think life is over tend to gather together. Looking back now, maybe I wanted to fill the loneliness, but it's also true that I began to associate with bad guys more and more. I was among the nuisance group that just rode around the streets on motorcycles at night. Even family members might abandon someone who engages in delinquency like that, but whenever my grandmother realized I had gone out, she would always come after me. She would catch me trying to escape outside and give me a lecture. I was 15 at the time, but I couldn't compete with my grandmother in her late 60s.
Even if you do this, your parents won't come back. You're just running away from reality.
She would give me the same lecture every time she caught me. Even though I said I was tired of hearing it, my grandmother wouldn't listen, and she kept lecturing me many times over until I obediently said yes. It didn't matter how many people were with me. My grandmother, who would just calmly take me back without hesitation, seemed invincible. But my grandmother, who never resorted to excessive violence, seemed to combine kindness and fear. As I grew up, I began to see signs of decline in my grandmother. I was worried, but my grandmother never complained.
Don't worry about me. You just need to do what you have to do.
While saying that, my grandmother's back as she went to bring in the laundry is still unforgettable. I never knew my grandmother was such a small person. Even after I got a job at my uncle's company, I never thought about leaving my grandmother. I wanted to stay by her side and support her until the end, considering all the trouble I had caused her. Seeing me not wanting to leave, my grandmother said, "Get married and get out soon." When I was a child, she would say stay at home, and when I became an adult, she would say go out, thinking she was a crazy person, but it was thanks to her that I was able to grow up so much. 1 year after becoming bedridden, after assisting my grandmother, who was over 90 years old, I would go to work every day. I can keep pushing myself like this every day because my grandmother is here. However, it was also true that I was starting to feel reluctant to go to work. Recently, a new manager came from a certain foreign company. The manager's name is John, a person in his late 30s who used to work for a foreign company. He had an extremely overbearing personality and was stubborn, not considering other people's circumstances. I heard that competition is fierce in foreign companies, and it's common for the atmosphere within the company to be tense. Sure enough, it seems that the manager was heavily influenced by his experience in the foreign company when he joined our company.
Now that I'm in this company, sales have to more than double. Everyone should follow me desperately. I'll definitely reward those who work hard with a good salary.
He was young and more proactive than experienced people, with a lively demeanor. He was trying to liven up the scene by giving instructions, but there were times when things didn't go smoothly. At first, my colleagues watched with smiles, but as they encountered more and more selfish situations, they began to distance themselves from the manager.
It's no use doing what that manager says. It's better to stay away.
I was advised like that, but if I kept doing that, it wouldn't be productive. Even though I argued that it was necessary to approach him even if I didn't like him, my colleagues never nodded their heads. One day, I was instructed to place an order with a client, and although I did as I was told, within 5 minutes, the situation turned into cancel the order. If I had called immediately, it wouldn't have been a big deal, but the attitude of the manager at that time was particularly annoying.
Sure, I told you to place the order, but it's not right to leave all the decisions to me. Figure things out and act on your own.
As if I was at fault for silently following orders, the manager said in a voice loud enough for others to hear. Internally frustrated, I managed to laugh it off somehow. My colleagues sighed and said, as expected. It seemed that this younger manager was more troublesome than I had thought. To be honest, I even started thinking I didn't want to deal with him unless he was my boss. However, the manager found me the most convenient to use, and he started exploiting me for even trivial matters. Although I had my own work to do, he would still push unnecessary tasks onto me, knowing fully well. I tried to endure it as much as I could, but when I finally pleaded with him to consider my workload as well, the manager didn't take it seriously.
This company is too lenient. In the company I used to work for, every day was a battlefield, and people like you didn't last. You're different, so I'm using you specially. Be grateful.
He kept talking as if he was doing me a favor by favoring me. Even though he ignored other colleagues when they approached him, he knew I wouldn't refuse, so he took advantage of me as he pleased. And I've never even thought about going to a foreign company or wanting to work there. I wish he would stop justifying himself with irrelevant talk. The manager never noticed my efforts to be polite and considerate, nor did he stop himself from saying unnecessary things that would annoy people. Is this the mentality typical of foreign companies? After that, the manager took advantage of the fact that I didn't complain and started dumping impossible tasks on me. He would assign work just before the end of the day, or even call me in on my days off for his personal errands, treating me like a good-natured slave. But he's the promising employee everyone expects a lot from. I've been here for years, but even if I complain, without evidence, it would just be brushed aside. If our relationship were to turn sour, who knows what he might do? One day, while I was hoping I could either get promoted or transferred to another department, my grandmother's condition worsened. My grandmother had an enlarged heart, and there was a problem with its structure. Normally, the heart has valves to prevent fresh blood and old blood from mixing, but my grandmother's heart valve had changed shape with age and could no longer close completely. As a result, old blood mingled with the blood sent throughout her body, causing symptoms of fatigue. Even though surgery was an option, the prognosis was poor, and due to rage, the doctors didn't recommend it. Thinking that I might need to stay home worrying about my grandmother, she denied my thoughts, anticipating them.
I've lived long enough. You've grown up admirably. I don't want anything more. Don't quit your job because of me.
Even though she was the one suffering the most, my grandmother never asked me to stay by her side stubbornly. Yet, despite that, I still wanted to stay with her and take care of her. Then, suddenly, my phone rang. Although I had a bad feeling, when I looked at the screen, the manager's name was displayed. It was the worst possible timing, but when I answered the call, the manager didn't bother to check on my situation and unilaterally announced,
I'm going golfing now. I'll invite you since I'm feeling generous.
an unexpected invitation to go golfing. However, considering my grandmother's condition, I couldn't go immediately. I tried to politely decline without upsetting the manager, but he showed no signs of backing down. When I honestly told him that a family member was ill, unbelievable words came out of the manager's mouth.
Don't waste your life for someone who's on their last legs.
That single phrase was nothing short of an insult to my grandmother, who had taken care of me all these years. He was meddling in my family affairs without knowing anything about me or my grandmother. Feeling that he was someone I couldn't trust as a human being, I countered the manager. What do you know about our relationship? You're disliked even within the company because you casually say things like that, aren't you?
Are you serious about that? I've been taking care of you specially. You'll regret this.
The manager seemed to have more to say, but I forced myself to end the conversation by hanging up. There was no point in continuing to talk. I felt like I might regret acting on impulse, but there was no way I could endure such words. My grandmother wasn't just a guardian to me. She's my irreplaceable family member. Being disregarded by someone else was nothing but humiliating. In the end, my grandmother's condition worsened, and she had to be hospitalized to monitor her condition. I couldn't stand the frustration of being unable to do anything, but I continued to pray for my grandmother's return, trusting the hospital. However, my wish did not come true, and that day my grandmother passed away. Her irregular heartbeat was detected in the middle of the night, but the doctor didn't arrive in time. The nurse told me she had said, "I hate hospitals. I'll show you I can go home." I can only admire my grandmother, who fought bravely against illness until the very end. Losing my only family member besides me was beyond sad. I wanted to keep crying, but no one around me would wait. The day after my grandmother's casket was brought in, a funeral was hastily arranged. I served as a chief mourner and informed relatives of my grandmother's passing. Even though I wanted to be by my grandmother's side as much as possible. On the day of the funeral, which happened to be a work day, I was trying to contact a company to inform them that I would be absent for my grandmother's funeral. The one who answered the phone was that manager. I could tell from the other end of the line that he was irritated. When I told him I couldn't go to work because of my grandmother's funeral, the manager once again said something unpleasant.
Don't take time off for funerals or weddings. Hugh does that. Come to the office right away.
Despite explaining that it was during the funeral, the fact that the manager demanded I come to work showed his lack of empathy. I didn't want to work any longer with someone who was so indifferent to others' feelings, so I told him over the phone. Well then, I quit. This funeral may be unnecessary for the company, but it's the most important thing in my life. Thank you for everything. I no longer needed the company after making up my mind. I could endure being by my grandmother's side even for just a second longer. As I made that decision, I heard mocking laughter as if ridiculing my judgment.
Are you planning to quit? Are you out of your mind? I don't know how many years you've worked here, but you're really a disappointment. Even if you beg to come back, I won't care. Do your best at your age.
The manager then hung up after spewing sarcastic remarks. There was never any understanding between us until the very end. Perhaps that was just how things were meant to be. Now liberated from that, when I thought of spending time for my grandmother's sake, I was approached by my uncle, Bob, from behind.
You've taken good care of my mother all this time. I'm sure she was happy to live with you.
My uncle was my late mother's brother and my grandmother's son. He told me that if my grandmother hadn't taken me in, I would have been entrusted to him. At the time, he had just started his own company and couldn't afford to take care of me, so my grandmother took me in and raised me, not wanting to interfere with his work.
Who are you talking to? Of course, you've informed the company that you're taking time off, right?
My uncle seemed to be trying to find out if something had happened after hearing the previous phone call. As he had brought me into the company, I couldn't keep quiet about what had just happened. Wouldn't it be disrespectful not to repay my uncle's kindness for bringing me into the company? However, I couldn't stay silent, so I honestly explained the situation to him. I hadn't expected that my actions would expose the manager's misdeeds. At first, my uncle was listening calmly, but as soon as I told him I had quit, his face turned pale. And when I told him that the reason I quit was because a boss had demanded I come to the office on the day of the funeral, his pale face turned red in an instant.
Did that John really tell you to come to work on the day of the funeral?
My trembling uncle nodded in silence. There was no point in hiding it, and it wouldn't benefit me. I apologized to him for quitting. However, my uncle said, "Such apologies don't matter," and put his hands on my shoulders.
I'm sorry. It's because of my company that you had to go through such a hard time. I won't be able to face my mother even in the afterlife like this. Please wait a little longer. I'll come to question him tomorrow.
After saying that, the next day after the funeral, I was at home alone when my uncle called. While hoping it wasn't a big issue, I answered the call, and my uncle apologized loudly.
I just heard the whole story from John. I don't remember ever allowing something like this within the company.
My uncle recounted his conversation with the manager. The next morning, when he called the manager in for questioning, he walked into the president's office without sensing anything wrong.
What's this about, Bob? Did you call me in this early for good news?
Thinking he might be getting a promotion, the manager tried to curry favor with my uncle as soon as he entered the room, but my uncle was irritated by his attitude and got angry. When he asked why I wasn't at the company, the flustered manager spilled everything.
I heard about the funeral over the phone, but there seems to be a misunderstanding. He repeatedly said he needed time off for the funeral.
However, the manager didn't seem remorseful and tried to justify his actions by saying I had acted on my own. Not realizing the relationship between me and my uncle, the manager shamelessly lied.
He's always had a habit of lying. I've been fooled many times too. He even asked me to take him golfing, but when I invited him, he said he couldn't come. And about the funeral, that's a lie too. He always tried to take time off on important days like that.
The uncle couldn't tolerate this statement any longer, so he informed the manager that he was also present at the funeral. When the manager learned the truth, he froze and didn't move a muscle. Perhaps at that moment, he realized the relationship between us. And because he understood in his head that everything he had said was a lie, he froze. Even though the manager was confident in his words, he probably didn't know how to justify himself. Finally, the uncle, who had made up his mind, declared his determination to the manager.
What you did was outrageous. Not only that, but you also mistreated a subordinate and a relative of mine. I can forgive you. We will discuss your disciplinary action at the internal meeting from now on.
He said that and told him to leave the president's office, but the manager didn't seem to agree and begged for mercy. He clung to Bob's legs and cried out, "Have mercy, have mercy." It was quite a scene. After that, with the help of other employees, he was taken outside, and Bob immediately called me.
I'm sorry, but can you come back again? Our company still lacks manpower, and such people are coming in frequently. There may be no end to the problems, but I want to expand our business.
Bob earnestly begged me over the phone to come back. Thanks to him, I was able to live with my grandmother while working. At my current age, it would be tough to start working at another company from scratch. Now that my grandmother is gone, I wanted to do my best at my familiar job. After that, the manager was disciplined and expelled from the company. As we listened to what the manager had done within the company, it became apparent that he had often imposed unreasonable demands on others, not just on me. It was even worse for a beautiful female employee in the accounting department who was almost called in late at night. He behaved as he pleased not only within the company but also outside. He used his position to place orders with subcontractors at ridiculously high prices and threatened not to place orders again if they dared to resist. My uncle, who was in charge of supervision, was at a loss for what to do with a situation that seemed endless. Afterward, the company decided to demand compensation from the former manager for seriously damaging trust. The amount of damage was reported to be astronomical, and it would probably be an amount that couldn't be paid even if he worked for a lifetime.
This is unheard of. It can be said that this company has been built on trust so far. We cannot forgive him for tarnishing it.
Although he was an excellent talent, Bob seemed to reflect on the fact that an unreasonable person could only lead to the collapse of social order. After returning to the company, I redirected the passion I had for my grandmother towards my work. Thanks to that, everything went smoothly, and I enjoyed it. Even when overtime was necessary, I didn't hesitate to do it. As our performance improved, I was offered a promotion by Bob. He even told me that he wanted me to succeed him as a successor. Ever since I lost my grandmother, I was afraid I might fall into despair again, but it seems that was unnecessary worry. Instead of drowning in sorrow, I want to keep myself busy. Perhaps my grandmother wished for that. Maybe she worried about what would happen after she was gone and wanted to steer me towards work. If that's the case, I can't thank my grandmother enough. Though it's too late for repaying her kindness, I had been thinking if I could contribute to society through my work. And then, I fell in love and got married to a new female employee who joined the company. She was too good for me, and she could do anything around the house. Thanks to her, I could concentrate more on my work, and the company expanded its scale. Bob also seemed satisfied with my achievements. Bob invited me, "Why don't we visit the grave?"
I'll show her the impressive grandchild. That's the best thing. And shouldn't we report about her great-grandchild too?
Yes, my wife was carrying my child. Although I was worried because of her advanced age, she insisted on having a child, so I made up my mind too. No matter what happens, I'll protect my baby, just like my grandmother did for me. There's still a lot to do, and it's tough, but I feel like there are more people supporting me than before. From now on, I want to support people, not just being supported. Thinking like my gentle and reliable grandmother, I headed towards her grave,